She said it as if I were a ghost standing in my own living room. Once she's moved out, we can finally start making this place feel young again. Before you begin, take a breath. This story may remind you of someone you know, or of a moment you survived in silence. Stay with me till the end, because the truth doesn't stay hidden forever. Not someday. Once I'm moved out. As if my life, my memories, my home were items she could pack in cardboard boxes and toss on the curb. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just sat there, my hands folded tightly in my lap, feeling the fabric of my old cardigan tremble under my fingertips. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, 9:14 p.m., each second echoing like a small hammer inside my chest. The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish, the one scent I still insisted on, and even that felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. My daughter-in-law, Melissa, stood in the center of the room with her arms crossed, tapping her foot against the hardwood floor as if she owned every inch of it. She talked loudly, confidently, the way people do when they assume everyone will agree with them, or when they assume no one will dare oppose them. My son, David, sat on the edge of the couch, shoulders tense, rubbing a hand across his forehead like he always did when stressed. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at her either. He just stared at the floor, my floor, as if it could tell him the right answer. I watched both of them quietly, letting the words settle. Inside, something cold and steady formed, a feeling I hadn't held in years. Not anger. Not panic. Something older. Sharper. A feeling women my age learn to keep tucked away until it's needed. Melissa continued walking around the room, her high heels clicking sharply with every step. She paused near the hallway and pulled a small measuring tape out of her back pocket. That was the first detail of the night that told me something was very, very wrong. She stretched the tape across the doorway, squinting at the numbers, muttering under her breath. 32 inches. That won't work. We'll have to expand it. And maybe take down this wall. Take down this wall? My wall. The wall that held photos of my husband and our early years together. The faded picture from Coney Island, the Christmas portrait where David was missing a front tooth, the old family reunion shot where my mother stood proudly in the center. I said nothing. Instead, I watched a small piece of dust fall from the frame as her elbow brushed it. The photos wobbled slightly. She didn't even notice. When she returned the tape to her pocket, something else slipped out, just halfway but enough for me to see it. A glossy sheet. A pamphlet. Dark blue with white print. A real estate renovation brochure. I breathed in slowly. Quietly. She wasn't just talking. She had plans. My son finally spoke, his voice quiet. Maybe we should slow down, Mel. Mom's still living here. Still living here. As if it were temporary. I turned my head slightly, pretending to adjust my glasses. My reflection in the dark window looked older than I remembered. Friendlier. But my eyes still held something sharp. Something she didn't expect. Melissa laughed. That arrogant, dismissive laugh she used whenever she thought someone was being too sensitive. Oh, come on. She doesn't use half this space. And she'll be better off somewhere with more supervision. Supervision. As if I were a child. She walked toward the mantel, touching things she had no right to touch. She lifted my porcelain angel figurine. My late husband gave it to me on our 25th anniversary, and she turned it in her hand carelessly, like it was a dollar store decoration. I clenched my fingers tighter to stop them from trembling. Not out of fear, but to keep myself from snatching it out of her hand. Melissa set the figurine down in the wrong place. Just anywhere. Another sign that she didn't see me. Not as a person, not as a mother, not even as the rightful woman of this home. Just an obstacle. Mel, David tried again, but she interrupted. I'm being practical. We'll move her to that assisted living place on Maple Street. The one my coworker's mother went to. They said it's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. A place where the walls smell of bleach, where the chairs have scratchy upholstery, where strangers walk you to dinner because you're not trusted to remember where the dining hall is. My chest tightened, but I kept my breathing steady. She walked over to the coffee table and placed a stack of papers down. I recognized my own handwriting at the top. My grocery list that had been on the fridge that morning. Except now, a different paper was stapled over it. A budget sheet. With figures circled. Amounts crossed out. Notes scribbled in her handwriting, not mine. I leaned forward slowly. Is that my list? I asked gently. She didn't look up from her phone. No. It's the new spending plan. I reorganized everything. It was a mess before. A mess. Because I spend my pension money on bread and canned soup instead of her designer candles. My eyes drifted back to the renovation brochure peeking from her pocket. I noticed something else now, the faint outline of a pen mark on the top. Backlist. She'd already marked several items. Paint color. Flooring options. Estimated timeline. Projected move-out date. Move-out date. My throat felt tight, but there was something else brewing underneath. Something steadier than emotion. I wasn't weak. I wasn't confused. And I wasn't alone. There was a small, quiet secret Melissa didn't know. Last month I had updated something. Something she believed was still in its old form. Something she assumed she controlled. And I wasn't about to explain it to her tonight. She walked closer. Her shadow stretched across the carpet, swallowing the small patch of light from the lamp beside me. She leaned in, voice low. You should start packing soon. I'll get you some boxes. Packing. She wanted me to pack my home into boxes like old Christmas ornaments. I looked up at her, meeting her eyes head-on for the first time during this entire conversation. Her smirk faltered. Just a little. You're making decisions very confidently tonight, I said softly. She crossed her arms. Someone has to. I gave her a small, polite smile. I agree. Someone does. She blinked, confused by the calm in my voice. I slowly rose from the couch, my knees aching slightly, the familiar stiffness reminding me of my age, but also of my endurance. Women like me don't crumble easily. We bend. We wait. We learn. The clock ticked again, 9:32 p.m. now. Outside, a cold breeze brushed the window pane, the branches of the old maple tree casting trembling shadows on the curtains. It felt like the house itself was listening, holding its breath. I stepped closer to her, stopping just inches away. My voice was quiet but steady. This house has history, I whispered. And history doesn't disappear just because someone wants new paint. Her eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me? No, I said. Just reminding you that walls remember things. And so do I. For the first time she looked unsettled. Good. She should be. Because I wasn't the ghost she thought I was. And when I glanced toward the hallway, toward the locked drawer in my bedroom where the new documents lay safely hidden, I felt a quiet strength rise in me. She didn't know it yet. But tonight, she set her own downfall in motion. I turned back toward her, giving her the kind of calm smile that always confused bullies. Careful what you wish for, I said softly. And then I walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of a home she believed she already owned. Not knowing that by the time this story ends, she'll be the one who doesn't belong here at all. I didn't sleep well that night. After walking away from Melissa in the living room, I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed, feeling the faint vibration of the house settling around me. It was an old house, nearly 50 years, and each creak had its own memory, its own story. I wondered if the walls could sense change coming before the people inside them did. I woke early the next morning, long before sunrise. Habit mostly. Older women like me don't sleep through the night anymore. We rest in pieces. The first thing I noticed was the quiet, the kind of stillness that feels a little too clean, too controlled. As I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, I felt something tugging at my intuition, the same way you feel a storm coming before the clouds even reach the sky. The kitchen light was on. That wasn't normal. I stepped inside and immediately saw the small drawer under the microwave pulled open. It was half closed, crooked, like someone had searched through it quickly. My grocery notes and old recipes used to be in that drawer, handwritten cards I'd kept for decades. But now most of those cards were shoved to one side, bent and wrinkled. And something else was missing. My pension letters. The official envelopes I always stored in that drawer. Gone. A cold weight settled in my chest. I checked the counter, the basket where I kept mail, even the small tin on top of the fridge where I sometimes placed unimportant bills. Nothing. Not a single envelope with my name on it. I opened the trash bin. Empty. Too empty. It had been full last night. That was the moment I knew she'd been awake after I went to bed. I stood still for a long moment, letting the realization sink in. It wasn't the first time things had gone missing, but this was the first time something important had been taken. Something she shouldn't even touch. Something she had no right to move. My hand trembled slightly as I shut the drawer. Not from fear. From confirmation. The quiet certainty that my instincts were right. She was planning something bigger than words and measuring tapes. I walked to the window and peeked outside. The sky was pale, the kind of early blue that comes before dawn. The air looked cold. Even from inside I could see frost gathering on the railing of the porch. My breath fogged the glass slightly. For a moment I just stood there watching the street wake up. Then I heard footsteps. Her footsteps. Light, almost cheerful taps on the floor. Too cheerful for someone awake at 6 in the morning. She walked in humming, still wearing yesterday's sweater and leggings. No makeup. Hair in a messy bun. She froze when she saw me standing in the kitchen doorway. "Oh," she said casually, "you're up early." I forced a small smile. "Just couldn't sleep." He shrugged. "Well, at least you're awake. I need to show you something later." My heart tightened at that. "Show me something?" She spoke the way a landlord talks to a tenant. I didn't answer. She opened the fridge, moved containers, then shut it again without taking anything. She was restless. Her movements were too quick, too purposeful. Before she left the kitchen, I asked softly, "Did you take out the trash last night?" She paused, hand on the doorway. "Yeah," she said too quickly. "It smelled weird." That wasn't true. I knew what weird smells like. Yesterday's trash didn't qualify. She left the kitchen, humming again, but her voice had a small crack in it now. A thin line of worry. Good. He should be nervous. I waited until she went upstairs before I opened the drawer again. This time I noticed something I'd missed earlier. My checkbook lying slightly out of place. I picked it up and flipped through the pages. 3 checks were missing. Not torn neatly, ripped roughly like someone had taken them in a hurry. I pressed a hand to my chest, steadying myself. He took my pension letters. He took my checks. For a moment the room felt smaller, like the air had thickened. But instead of panicking, I sat down at the kitchen table and breathed slowly. Women my age don't react the way younger women do. We've lived enough life to know that panic is useless and silence is powerful. When the sun finally rose, I grabbed my coat and walked to the bank. It was a short walk, 2 blocks, and the cold stung my cheeks, waking me up fully. The sidewalk glittered with thin frost, and my breath puffed in small clouds as I moved. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I kept walking. I didn't call my son. I didn't confront her. I needed facts before I made my next move. When I entered the bank, the warm air felt almost comforting. The teller, a kind woman named Sarah who'd known me for years, greeted me with a smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennett. You're out early today." "I needed some statements," I said. "And I believe I need to check on a few transactions." Her eyebrows lifted. "Of course. Let me print the latest activity for you." While she tapped on her computer, I stood still, gripping the edge of the counter. I felt my pulse beating sharply under my skin. I reminded myself to breathe. When the printer whirred to life, I felt something shift. A quiet certainty. A readiness. Sarah handed me the pages with a concerned expression. "Is everything all right?" I nodded, though my stomach tightened as I scanned the first line of transactions. There were purchases I didn't recognize. Restaurants I'd never visited. Decor stores I'd never stepped foot in. And then, an online order for a designer mirror priced so high it made me blink twice. "Do you remember making these purchases?" Sarah asked gently. "No," I said. "I do not." My voice sounded calmer than I expected. She leaned in. "Do you want me to place a temporary hold on the account?" "Yes," I whispered. "Put everything on hold." She clicked a few buttons. "It's frozen now. No one can withdraw or use your card." No one. Meaning, she couldn't. A slow warmth spread through me. Not happiness, not satisfaction, something more solid. Step forward. A shift in the ground. When I left the bank, I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I stopped at the small park across the street. I sat on the bench, watching the morning sun push through the clouds. Children were playing in the distance, their laughter echoing faintly. A dog barked. A man jogged past. Life was continuing as if nothing unusual had happened. But something had happened. Melissa had moved from disrespect to intrusion. And now to theft. And she believed no one noticed. I folded the statements carefully into my purse and sat there a few more minutes, letting the cold air sharpen my thoughts. Then I walked home. Melissa was in the living room when I entered, sitting with her legs crossed, scrolling on her phone. A cup of coffee steamed on the table beside her. She didn't look up. I placed my purse on the dining table quietly. She finally spoke. You were out early. Yes, I said. I had some things to check. She glanced at me with quick darting eyes. Guilty eyes. She tried to hide it, but I saw the flicker of unease. Everything okay? She asked. Everything is becoming clearer, I replied. Her smile faltered. What do you mean by that? You'll understand soon. He stared at me, trying to read my expression. But I gave her nothing, just the same polite smile I used last night. The smile that hides more than it reveals. Later that afternoon, while she took a call in the hallway, I heard her whispering urgently. No, not yet. I said I'm working on it. Yes, the money should be enough to start. No, she doesn't suspect anything. She lowered her voice, but not enough. She didn't know I was standing just around the corner, quiet as shadow. She didn't know that every word she spoke was tightening the rope she'd thrown around her own neck. She didn't know that I now understood exactly what she was after. Not my comfort, not my care, not my well-being. My home. My money. My future. And she believed she had already won. She couldn't have been more wrong. That thought stayed with me long after her phone call ended. I stood quietly in the hallway, my hand resting on the cool wall, listening to the sharp click of her footsteps as she walked into the kitchen. There was a new stiffness in her walk, a rigidness I hadn't noticed before. She was nervous. Good. That meant she sensed a shift even if she didn't understand it yet. I stepped back into the living room and sat in my usual chair. My purse lay on the dining table with the bank statements tucked safely inside. I felt their weight in the room, heavier than paper should ever feel. They were proof, not just of what she had done, but of what she was capable of doing if I didn't act quickly. The house was unusually quiet. Even the refrigerator hummed softer, as if cautious. Outside, the birds that usually chirped on the porch railing had gone silent, replaced by the distant sound of a truck rumbling up the street. I folded my hands together and waited. A few minutes later, Melissa walked in with a cup of tea. She didn't offer me any. She almost never did. She sat on the couch and scrolled through her phone, feigning calmness, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. David will be home late, she said suddenly. Work meeting. I nodded. Of course. She didn't look up. Maybe you should take a nap. You look tired. That was her code. Whenever she wanted the house to herself, she told me to nap. She thought I didn't notice. I'll rest later, I said. Her jaw tightened. Just a flicker, but I caught it. She stood, walked to the mail pile on the end table and flipped through it. Bills, flyers, coupons. Nothing with my name on it. She checked twice, pretending she wasn't checking. She was worried I had found something. I watched her quietly. Expecting something? I asked. He stiffened. Just organizing. Then she gathered the mail in her arms and walked upstairs without another word. As soon as she disappeared, I rose from my chair and went to the small built-in desk near the hallway. I unlocked the drawer, one she always overlooked because she assumed I kept nothing important in it, and pulled out a notebook. A plain, spiral notebook with faded blue lines. I placed it on the table, opened it, and clicked my pen. The first entry I'd made weeks ago was simple. Missing grocery money, $40. Since then the list had grown. Dates. Amounts. Receipts she tried to hide. Times she took my card and didn't return it until morning. But now it was time to update it. This entry was different. Bigger. I wrote slowly, my hands steady. Unauthorized card use. Multiple purchases. Statement retrieved. Account frozen. Then I added more details. Store names, transaction times, amounts. I wrote down the new pieces of information, including the conversation I heard in the hallway. My handwriting wasn't as neat as it used to be, but every letter was clear enough to read. Evidence didn't have to be beautiful. It just had to be true. When I closed the notebook, I felt a small surge of courage. This wasn't just a list anymore. It was a record. A witness. And I wasn't done. I spent the next hour moving through the house, slowly, deliberately, noticing things I had overlooked before. Little signs. Subtle changes. In the laundry room, I found one of my blouses balled up behind the washer, stained with something sticky. I'd never seen that stain before. Lip gloss. Makeup? I didn't use either anymore. Maybe she borrowed it without asking. Or maybe it meant nothing. So I took a photo. Evidence wasn't always obvious at first glance. In the hallway, I noticed a faint scratch near the lock on my bedroom door. A U1. As though someone had tried to open it with something other than a key. My stomach tightened. I brushed my fingers over the scratch and whispered to myself, she won't get what she's looking for. The documents were still safe. Still hidden. Still mine. I went back to the living room and sat near the window, the sunlight warming my hands. The warmth was comforting, grounding. Outside, I saw the mail truck pull up to deliver today's stack. Melissa was faster. She rushed downstairs, grabbed the mail before I could move, and disappeared without a word. She was filtering my mail now. Another piece of the puzzle. I waited until she went back upstairs. Then I quietly followed her. Not too closely, just enough to hear the faint sound of paper rustling. She was in the guest room. The door was cracked open just an inch, enough for me to hear her whispering to someone again. No, I told you. I need the money first. I can't do anything without it. Yes, I'm handling her. Just trust me. My breath caught. Handling her. She spoke about me like I was a burden, a task, a problem to solve. I stepped away before she noticed my shadow. Back downstairs, I went straight to my purse, opened it, and checked the statements again. I read them more carefully this time, line by line. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. A withdrawal. A large one. 2 days ago. Gish. I pressed a hand to my mouth. I hadn't made that withdrawal. I didn't even know the PIN had changed last week. Something she claimed the bank updated automatically. The bank must have seen it too, but they hadn't flagged it. Not yet. I needed more than bank statements. I needed a witness. I waited until Melissa left the house for her usual late morning walk. A routine she used to make herself appear innocent and carefree. She walked briskly down the street, phone in hand, pretending to be busy. She didn't realize how much she gave away with her speed. Guilty people move quickly. Once she turned the corner, I grabbed my coat again, tucked the notebook under my arm, and walked to the small legal office near the pharmacy. I'd passed it hundreds of times but had never stepped inside. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile. Good morning. How can we help you? I'd like to speak to someone about financial concerns, I said, choosing my words carefully. Within minutes, I was seated across from Mr. Thompson, a soft-spoken man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a neat gray beard. His office smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, a comforting, familiar scent. He folded his hands on the desk. Tell me what's going on. I opened my notebook slowly, placing it between us. She had tried to take my money. She had taken my mail. She had ripped checks from my book. She had made large cash withdrawals. She had taken my pension letters. She had spoken about moving me out of my home. She had been planning something with someone. But I didn't tell him everything at once. I told him piece by piece, giving him moments to absorb the weight of each detail. As I spoke, his expression shifted from concern to focus to something sharper. Professional alarm. Mrs. Bennet, he said gently, you've done the right thing coming here. We can take action. Quietly. Quietly is exactly what I want, I said. He nodded. We'll start with documenting everything formally. Then we'll work on securing your assets. You're not alone in this. The words settled over me like a warm blanket. You're not alone in this. For months, it felt like I had been trapped behind invisible glass, watching everything slip from my hands. But now I had clarity, support, a plan. Mr. Thompson made copies of my notebook entries, scanned the bank statements, and typed notes as I spoke. When he handed me a folder of documents to take home, my hands felt steadier than they had in days. We'll move carefully, he said. Let her believe she's in control. That will make the evidence stronger. I stood, gripping the folder against my chest. I know how to keep quiet. He smiled. Most strong women do. The walk home felt different this time. The cold air no longer stung. It awakened something in me. A renewed sense of purpose. A sense of taking back control inch by inch. When I reached the house, Melissa's car wasn't in the driveway. Good. I needed a few minutes alone. I placed the legal folder in the safe place she would never think to look and shut the cabinet door softly. Then I looked around my living room, my pictures, my furniture, my memories, and whispered, you won't take this from me. Not my home. Not my dignity. Not my future. She thought she was stealing from a helpless old woman. But while she stole in the shadows, I was building something far stronger than she ever expected. Case. Reckoning. And she had no idea what was coming next. That thought lingered with me for the next 2 days. Not as a threat, not as a fantasy, simply as a quiet truth that settled deeper every hour. I moved through the house in a calm, steady rhythm. I cooked simple meals. I watered the plants. I folded my laundry. I even sat on the porch once, letting the afternoon sun warm my face. I behaved like a woman with nothing unusual happening in her life. Melissa, on the other hand, paced the house like a restless shadow. She kept her phone close. She went through drawers she hadn't touched in months. She wiped the counters aggressively, then wiped them again. She snapped at my son for small things: his coat left near the stairs, the keys misplaced, the mail he forgot to check. Every little detail irritated her now. She was unraveling strand by strand. David didn't notice the deeper reason. He just looked exhausted. His shoulders drooped lower each night. His voice was softer, careful. He hated tension more than conflict, and this house had become full of both. The morning everything happened, I woke to the sound of Melissa's voice drifting down the hallway. It wasn't anger this time, just low, intense whispering. The kind I had come to recognize as scheming. "She's not being cooperative," she said to someone on the phone. "Just give me a few more days. I'll get the rest of what we need." Not I need. Another clue. I didn't push the door open or try to hear more. I'd gathered enough already. Instead, I went into the kitchen and sat quietly at the table. The tea kettle warmed on the stove, whistling gently. I poured myself tea and held the cup between my palms, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. When she came downstairs 10 minutes later, she stopped abruptly at the sight of me. "Oh," she said. "You're awake early again." I nodded. "I've been waking early most of my life." She forced a smile. The kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "We're having a budget meeting tonight, just so you know. I want to go through a few things with David." "Budget meeting? Of course. Should I be there?" I asked lightly. She hesitated. "If you want." Which meant she didn't want me there. I took another sip of my tea and said nothing. She walked to the fridge, opened it, shut it again, opened it once more, unable to settle, unable to quiet her nervous energy. When David came downstairs and grabbed his coat for work, she clung to his arm in a way that looked more like ownership than affection. "Come home early," she insisted. "We need to talk." He sighed. "I'll try." After he left, Melissa turned to me with a tight smile. "You should rest today. You've been tense." I set my cup down. "I feel fine." Her jaw pulsed once. "Well, rest anyway." She walked away before I could respond. The doorbell rang. A single sharp sound that cut through the house. Melissa froze mid-step. She turned slowly, eyebrows drawn together. "Who is that?" I remained seated. "Why don't you see?" She approached the door cautiously, smoothing her hair with trembling fingers before opening it. A uniformed officer stood there with a clipboard tucked under one arm and 2 sealed envelopes in his hand. "Good morning. I have documents for a Melissa Carter," he said. Her breath hitched so faintly I almost didn't hear it. I'm Melissa," she said, her voice shaky. He handed her the envelopes. "These require your acknowledgement. Please sign here." She stared at the papers as if they were in a foreign language. "What is this?" she whispered. "I'm not at liberty to explain the details," the officer said kindly. "Everything you need is inside." She signed mechanically, barely gripping the pen, then stood frozen until he walked down the driveway and disappeared. The moment she shut the door, silence swallowed the room. Not peaceful silence, tight, suffocating silence stained with fear. She tore the first envelope open. Her eyes moved quickly over the page. Then the color drained from her face. What is this supposed to mean?" she breathed. I said nothing. I just watched her hands shake. The second envelope trembled in her grip. She ripped the seal, unfolded the paper, scanned the lines. Her mouth fell open. "No," she whispered. No. So I said nothing. She thudded back against the wall and slid to the floor, her breathing unsteady. Her voice cracked. "You did something." Finally, I stood up from the table and took a slow step toward her. "Did something?" I repeated softly. "No, Melissa. I protected myself." Her eyes darted across the room as if looking for an escape route that didn't exist. She held the documents like they were burning her hands. "This says I have to vacate the property," she choked out. "Vacate? Me? Why? How? I didn't answer immediately. I wanted her to absorb every word written on that page. I wanted her to feel the weight of her own decisions pressing down on her shoulders. She scanned the next line. And what is this? She pointed to the second notice. Financial exploitation? Investigation pending? This can't be real. Oh, it's very real, I said quietly. She shook her head rapidly. No, you're lying. This is some kind of mistake. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside gently. The morning light spilled across the floor, touching her only at the edge, just enough to highlight the tension around her eyes. Melissa, I said calmly, you've made choices for months. You took what wasn't yours. You planned things behind closed doors. And you believed I wouldn't notice. Her voice cracked. You're twisting things. I'm documenting things, I corrected. She clutched the papers to her chest as if hiding them would change their meaning. You're ruining everything. That depends on what everything means to you, I said. She pushed herself to her feet, clinging to the wall for balance. You're doing this because you hate me. I looked at her evenly. I did nothing out of hatred. I did everything out of necessity. For a moment she stood utterly silent. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes darting around with frantic confusion. She was thinking, calculating, even in panic. That was who she was. Finally she whispered, You can't ask me to leave. David won't allow it. A small, sad smile tugged at my lips. This isn't about what David allows. This is about what the law requires. She flinched as if slapped. The fear deepened in her eyes. Not fear of losing the house. Fear of losing control. He won't believe you, she said desperately. You don't have proof. I met her gaze fully. Then you should have been more careful with my mail. My checks. My card. And your phone calls. Her breath hitched violently. You were listening? You were loud. Her shoulders sank as though the air inside them collapsed. You don't understand what you've done, she whispered. I understand perfectly. She took a step toward me, her eyes pleading now. Please. Let me fix this. We can work something out. I shook my head slowly. There's nothing left to work out. Her hands dropped to her sides, the documents fluttering slightly as though even the air rejected them. She seemed small suddenly, shrunk, exposed in a way she never allowed herself to be. You don't know the whole story, she whispered. I know enough. Please, she said again, her voice cracking on the word. Please. I took a breath, steady and calm. Melissa, this didn't happen because of one bad decision. It happened because of many. Her lips trembled. What am I supposed to do? That, I said, is for you to decide. She looked down at the documents, gripping them tighter as if squeezing them would make the letters disappear. The silence stretched between us, heavy, loaded, inevitable. When the front door opened moments later and David walked in unexpectedly early, she spun toward him with wild eyes. David, she gasped. You need to help. But her voice broke completely when she saw the folder in his hand. He had his own copy. Her last hope shattered, and the sound it made was silence. David stood in the doorway holding the folder, and the moment Melissa saw it, the last bit of color drained from her face. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at him. She just stared at that folder like it was a verdict being handed down. And in a way it was. David, she whispered, her voice thin, cracking. Please. Listen to me before. He held up a hand. Not angry, not loud, just firm. A type of firmness I hadn't seen from him in years. Mel, what is this? She shook her head rapidly, strands of hair slipping from her bun. It's nothing. It's just a misunderstanding. Your mother, she's confused. I'm not confused, I said quietly. David's eyes shifted to me, searching, hurting. He wasn't a child anymore, but in that moment I saw the boy he used to be. The one who came running to me after falling off his bike, needing truth more than comfort. Mom, he said softly, is all this real? I looked at him steadily. Every line. Melissa made a strangled sound in her throat. David. She's twisting everything, I swear. She waved the papers in the air, frantic. These notices, they're exaggerated. Someone's trying to. He cut her off again, voice trembling now. So you did take her mail? She froze. And her card. Silence. And you made withdrawals? Her shoulders sagged. And you talked about sending her away behind my back? Her eyes filled with tears. Real or not, I wasn't sure anymore. I had reasons, she whispered. You don't understand what it's like handling everything, taking care of everything. You weren't taking care of her, David said quietly. You were taking advantage of her. The words hung between them like a crack in the earth too wide to step over. Melissa pressed her hands to her mouth, trembling. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. Don't let her. It's already done, I said softly. David turned his head toward me, and in his eyes I saw grief, guilt, and an exhaustion that came from years of being pulled between love and manipulation. He walked over to me slowly and sat beside me on the couch. He didn't speak. He just took my hand and squeezed it, his head bowing under the weight of everything he was feeling. Melissa stood alone by the doorway, clutching the notices like broken shields. Then the officer's car, still parked outside, stepped out a second time. Another knock at the door. Mrs. Carter? He asked, looking between her and David. She nodded weakly. I need verbal acknowledgement that you understand the timeline stated in the notice. She swallowed hard. 72 hours. Yes, he said gently. 3 days. 3 days. The number echoed through the room. 3 days to pack. 3 days to face consequences. 3 days before the house returned to me, fully, legally, undeniably. She nodded stiffly. The officer left. And with that, the house exhaled. The next 3 days were heavy, but not in the painful way I expected. They were heavy in the way rain clouds feel before they break. The slow release of years of tension. Melissa moved through the house quietly, packing her belongings in cardboard boxes she had once bought for me. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Each time she carried a box downstairs, she paused when she saw me sitting in the living room. But I didn't move. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I simply watched. Not out of cruelty. Out of closure. Each box was a piece of my life being returned. On the second evening, she stood near the kitchen doorway, hugging a stack of folded sweaters. I never meant for things to go this far, she said softly. I didn't look away from the window. Things only go far when someone pushes them. She swallowed hard. I thought I was doing what was best for us. For you, I corrected gently. Not for us. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it quickly. I don't expect forgiveness. I know, I said. And I'm not offering it. She flinched, but she nodded. For once, she didn't argue. David spent most of those days quietly helping her pack. Not because he wanted to. Because he needed to. Closure takes different forms for every person. For him, it meant facing the truth one box at a time. For me, it meant watching him learn to separate love from loyalty. On the morning of the third day, Melissa carried the final box to her car. She stood at the edge of the driveway, staring up at the house as if trying to memorize it. David walked over and said something I couldn't hear. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and climbed into the car. The engine started. She didn't look back when she drove away. When the wheels left the driveway, the silence felt different. Not suffocating. Not tense. Clean. White. David walked back into the house slowly. He stood in the living room, breathing deeply, rubbing the back of his neck. He looked around like he was seeing the house for the first time in years. I'm sorry, he whispered. I stood up, walked to him, and placed a hand on his cheek, the way I used to when he was little. You don't need to apologize for someone else's choices. He closed his eyes and leaned into my hand, his voice cracking. I should have protected you. You're protecting me now, I said softly. And that's enough. He hugged me tightly, his shoulders shaking just once. When we pulled apart, he looked older and younger all at once. Will you be okay? He asked. I've been okay, I said. Now I'll simply be better. He nodded slowly, kissed my forehead, and left for work. For the first time in months, the door shut without dread echoing behind it. Later that afternoon, I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to the porch. I sat in the rocking chair my husband had built decades ago. The wood creaked softly beneath me in a familiar, comforting rhythm. A small breeze drifted through the yard, carrying the scent of cut grass and the faint sweetness of the azalea bushes that lined the walkway. Neighbors passed by. Some waved, some said hello. A few glanced curiously at the empty driveway. News travels fast in quiet neighborhoods, but no one asked questions. Not yet. A car pulled up around 5 in the evening. I recognized it immediately, silver, slightly dented near the bumper. My granddaughter stepped out. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw me. "Grandma." I opened my arms and she rushed toward me, embracing me so tightly I laughed through the ache in my chest. "I got your message," she said breathlessly. "I came as soon as I could." I smiled. "I'm glad." She sat beside me on the porch steps. "Dad called me." He filled me in. I nodded. "I figured he would." She looked at me seriously. "I'm proud of you." That surprised me more than it should have. I blinked slowly. "Proud?" "Yes," she said firmly. "For standing up for yourself. For protecting what's yours." She gently took my hand. "And guess what arrived in the mail today?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a document, the deed transfer I had almost forgotten in the chaos. He placed it in my hands. "It's official now." The paper felt warm, almost alive, between my fingers. Not because of the ink or the seal or the signatures, but because of what it meant. Security. Justice. Freedom. Continuation. The house wasn't just a building. It was my life. My husband's memory. My son's childhood. My refuge. And now my granddaughter's future. We sat there quietly, watching the sun sink behind the trees, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. For the first time in a very long time, the house felt alive again. As if its walls were inhaling deeply after months of holding their breath. "I'm staying with you tonight," my granddaughter said suddenly. I laughed. "You don't have to." "I know," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "But I want to." We sat there until the street lights flickered on, the world growing gentle and dim around us. The porch light glowed softly above us, a warm halo on the front of the house. My house. Ours now. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze brush across my face. I felt lighter. Stronger. Whole. I whispered to myself, barely loud enough to hear. Silence is not surrender. It's preparation. And this time, the silence felt like peace. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own strength, don't leave without subscribing. I share a new story every day, stories of courage, quiet justice, and the hidden battles women face. You're not alone here.